every single movie that you see get made, every single TV show is a miracle.
Welcome to the Craft Podcast. I am John Pan.
And I am Veronica Pickett. And today we're here with our guest, Eric Hsiao, creative executive at Perfect Storm Entertainment. Thanks so much, Eric.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
So we're here on the Craft Podcast, and we generally start by asking our guests, how would you describe your craft?
My craft is finding ideas, finding stories that I feel like would make for great film and TV, and then figure out how do we get from an idea phase all the way up until you start rolling camera.
Amazing. Well, I feel like there's an element then of knowing a little bit about stories, but also knowing about how to give people notes about stories or communicate your own thoughts. There's an art of communication there too.
Yeah, it's all communication. It's all trying to find stories that really resonate with me, that really fit with what the company is looking for, and then communicating your passion, communicating your vision, whether it's communicating that with the principal of the company I work for, Justin Lin, and then communicating our vision to the studios that we work with. So whether it's Universal or any other studio we might work with, it's all, and then it's, of course, when we are looking to hire writers or directors or any other kind of creative partner with along the process, everything is about communicating and articulating and conveying what our vision is for the project.
That sounds really cool. That sounds like a cool job that many people want. Could you tell us some common misconceptions that people have about being a creative executive? Maybe things aren't as glamorous as people think. What do you think?
I mean, I can talk about like my misconceptions before I entered the industry or before I started this career. That as a producer, as a development exec, actually, how I would describe it as, so when I went to film school, my idea of making movies was always about like we're hitting the ground, we're working with camera, working with actors, we're on set all the time. It's always a very kind of physical, tangible kind of craft of what you're doing, right? You're constantly working with other people. There's just it's a kind of very active, physically active kind of process. And it was only until I, started really in this career, I realized most of your work is actually, you're done at a desk. It's all through email, it's phone calls, it's a lot of reading. Like 90% of my job is actually reading scripts, reading books, reading articles, reading graphic novels. It's all the stuff it's all reading a bunch of stuff to figure out what you want to actually get made. But you have to read 1,000 scripts before you can find that one script that can actually get made.
When you were talking about it being really physical, I was thinking to myself, I know where this is going. As I slouch here at my desk, it's ultimately a lot of times a desk job, right? Even though a really, really cool desk job, the stuff happening inside your body.
It's almost entirely desk. Maybe I'm just feeling that because it's been work from home for a year and a half. I mean, a big part of the job really is also a lot of human interaction, but that's like when you're hearing pitches from writers, or writers will come in, they'll pitch, they have some kind of movie idea and they're pitching their idea, or I'm meeting with writers on a project that we're currently working on, and I'm kind of communicating my notes and my feedback on their draft and how we can kind of like improve the draft that we're working on. And there's a lot of kind of just kind of brainstorming, working with my colleagues as we kind of figure out story and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I guess right now it feels like I'm always staring at a screen and everything's always on Zoom. But yeah, there's still that very big kind of human element to all of that. What really is not a big part, if not a part of my job at all, is being on set and all that kind of stuff. That's actually more of a reward, like of a job well done, is once you actually get to that physical production stage when you're actually rolling camera and all that kind of stuff. as a development exec, then we can visit set, and you don't really have any responsibilities there except for eating, craft services and hanging out, and then just. But that's like really exciting. Is finally seeing your work come to life. But that's always a cherry on top. At the very, very end of the process.
You talked a little bit about the misconceptions that you had about what a creative executive's job might be like before you started. Do you have a different sense of the movie making business now that you're inside the belly of the beast, rather than sort of what you thought about all the different movies that you saw coming out from the outside?
Yeah, so from the outside, when you see just movies being released all the time, right? Like you're seeing like new movies in theaters, new movies in on streaming, just constantly being released, and it kind of feels like movies just get made, right? And that it's a pretty direct process for like there's an idea, or there's a book, or there's some form of IP, and somebody had found it, and then they wrote a script, and they went and made it, and then you see it in theaters like a year or two later, not realizing that for every movie that you see actually being released, there are hundreds, maybe more projects that never see the light of day, right? You can just kind of never get off the ground, whether it's the script can never get to the shape that it needs to be in. The money you just couldn't find enough financing to support the budget of the project. Schedules don't work out. Like you have one actor attached, and you get another actor, but schedules just never aligned up, and then one of the actors fall off, and without that actor, the financing falls through, and then the project dies. And that is the one big kind of I would say emotional struggle of being a producer or development exec, is that you can be spending years, 5, 6, 7, 10 years working on a project, working on a handful of projects, and putting in your blood, sweat, and tears to try to push it through. And more often than not, it's just not going to happen. And it's only when I have been working in this industry for a handful of years am I really truly recognizing that every single movie that you see get made, every single TV show is a miracle. Every project is an absolute miracle when it gets made. That I can't badmouth movies anymore. Even what movie that we might objectively say that's a bad movie, I can't believe that got made. I'm like, man, I am so impressed that they got that made. It's that's just some form of like magic or alchemy for any movie to get made. So that was a huge kind of like surprise, or once I started working there.
Well, you just have to marvel at the amount of work that's gone in to even make this happen in the first place.
So, Eric, you mentioned that this whole filmmaking process can take years. Could you highlight to us the high-level stages of going from ideation to distribution?
Yeah, I mean, there's how many big stages are there? So the big stages of filmmaking is development, production, post-production, and the distribution. And so development is where I focus on, and that's you're finding the ideas, you're finding the source material, you're finding the story, and then trying to do everything that you can to get what's called the green light, right? So the basics are if you have a script, if you have your main you got your director, your writer, and your money. You can go make a movie, right? But ideally, maybe you want to set it up at a studio, because that will kind of guarantee financing and distribution. So setting up a studio, meaning you're setting it up at Universal, Disney, Sony, those kinds of places. And once you put in all the big pieces together and the studio says, yes, let's go make this, you get the green light. And then From there, you actually have what's called pre-production. It's usually kind of put in the same category as production, but pre-production is all the more like once you get the green light, all the things that you have to do to plan for actually being ready to actually start shooting the movie. And that's figuring out the budget, figuring out the scheduling, figuring out the locations, figuring out the your department heads. So you got to find like a production designer, a costume designer, and kind of filling out the rest of the crew, like the cinematographer or line producers, all that kind of stuff. And you kind of have like a deadline because you're aiming to shoot at a certain time. Maybe you got sound stages or locations or the actor availability or director availability. You have a window that you're aiming for, and hopefully by the time that window is ready to open, all the pieces are in place, you can actually start shooting. The reason why you do so much planning in terms of development of pre-production stage, you do so much planning beforehand is because production, when you actually have everybody on set, you actually start shooting, it's because it's really, really expensive. And so you gotta make sure everything's planned as carefully as possible, that you're not wasting a single moment. That because like development, the stage that I'm focused on, there's no the cost of changing things or any kind of adjustments. There's really no cost to it. If I need to make a change to the script, you can kind of make a change. It's not a big deal. If you need to make any kind of change to the script on set, that becomes like a huge kind of ordeal that you want to avoid. So your whole goal is to make sure your production, physical production, is as smooth of a process as possible. And once you finish shooting, once you wrap, once you get all the footage in the can, then you move on to what's called post-production. That's essentially all the editing, kind of visual effects, music, sound, and all that kind of stuff, right? So and all the just kind of editing work that needs to be done, and that can take a while. But obviously, it's a lot cheaper than actual physical production. Hopefully, you got a release date that you're aiming for. That the studio had set some kind of release date, or if it's an independent film that you want to like make sure you're finished by the time you need to submit it for festivals. You're trying to get into Sundance or Toronto or Cannes, you got to make sure you're hitting certain deadlines. And then once you finish on the post-production, then ideally you're moving on to distribution phase. Right? So for a typical studio film, you already have a release date, and that work involves, making sure the prints can get to all the theaters. This is if we're talking about traditional kind of theatrical release. Making sure that you negotiated with all the theaters in terms of how many theaters you're going to be playing in, how many screens you're going to be playing on, and all that kind of stuff. And you got to plan all the marketing. So, the TV commercials, the online ads, the billboards, making sure people actually know about your movie and either want to go out to the theaters to watch it, turn on Netflix to watch it, what have you. So yeah, that's a very kind of more streamlined process of how you go from idea phase to a movie, actually getting to your eyeballs.
Thank you. That was an awesome overview. And I wonder, tracking back to the idea phase specifically, like very, very beginning of the process, which is also where you come in as a creative development exec. And when these things are first coming to you, sort of how fully baked are they? Are you dealing with a raw cookie dough kind of ideas? Like, I see young Sheldon as James Bond or whatever. That's not a real pitch. Or, are you reviewing fully fleshed scripts that already have production teams attached?
Yeah, it totally runs the gamut. You can have all different kind of forms. So the most typical is a spec script. That's a writer had written a spec. It's called spec script because they wrote it speculatively. Which meaning that nobody paid them to write the script. They wrote the script completely and then hoping to kind of sell it or option the script somewhere to like a producer or whatever. So most of them are scripts that agents, managers sending us scripts, wanting us to consider for us to produce, or for Justin to direct. and kind of go from there. But a lot of times we get books. So, that's another form. Pitches, just kind of verbal pitches. They're pitching us, a writer will pitch us the story, maybe like all 3 acts, quite a bit of detail. And if we love it, then they're hoping that we'll, pay them to actually write it into a full script. It could also come from graphic novels. That's very popular. That's been really popular over the last, decade or two. Podcasts is a new big thing. It's particularly like scripted podcasts. It's going to be hard to adapt this podcast into a movie, but a lot of kind of like scripted podcasts that they're hoping to get that turned into a movie or TV show. Oh man, you can edit this. I'm blanking on the name. What's that? Julia Roberts Amazon TV series. That's probably the most notable example of a audio scripted podcast that got turned into a TV show. Homecoming, yes. So one of the most notable examples is Homecoming, starring Julia Roberts. That was on Amazon, I want to say a year or two ago. And that was the most notable example of a podcast being turned into a TV series or movie.
Awesome.
Okay, I have a quick question before we continue, because you've mentioned Justin a couple of times. We actually didn't ask you to explain who is Justin, and tell us a little bit about Perfect Storm Entertainment, because a lot of the listeners are not from the entertainment industry, so they wouldn't know.
Yeah, so Justin Lin is a film director, best known for directing a number of the Fast and Furious films. His breakout hit was Better Luck Tomorrow. It was a big hit at Sundance, and just one of the most notable examples of an all Asian American independent film. He's also directed other things like Star Trek Beyond. He did a season of True Detective. He's also done a few episodes of Community. We have like a robust TV arm as well. So TV show like Warrior on HBO Max, and a handful of shows that we've done for CBS, like Scorpion, SWAT, and Magnum PI. So he started out as a director, and then got to a point where he wanted to produce as well. So started this production company called Perfect Storm Entertainment. A lot of what we do is producing the stuff that he will direct, but there's also stuff like Warrior, the TV show, which is just kind of a pure producing play.
In terms of creative development, right, every prodco, agency, distributor, what have you, is going to be looking for something a little bit different. Is there sort of a consistent flavor to the kind of projects that Perfect Storm is looking for, or does it change over time?
Yeah, so for a production company like ours, it's very much reflective of the values and the vision and the interests of Justin. So a lot of it is kind of catering to the kinds of stories and the kind of characters that really resonate with him, trying to cater to that. But then on top of that, so our company has what's called a first look overall deal with Universal, both on the film and the TV side. And so Universal, they have their own mandate as well. So like on the TV side, they're looking for kind of certain films, like certain TV shows, like they're looking for like an action adventure. They want a heist show, or they want some kind of like globe-trotting spy show, or they're looking for a family sitcom or whatever. And they just kind of communicate their mandate. And we're hoping that there's going to be some kind of fit, like, big action adventure. That's what we're good at, and that's what Universal is looking for. That could be a good fit, and we try to cater to that. So those are really our kind of like two big targets: is what Justin loves, what Justin wants to do, what Justin's passionate about, and then also making sure that we're kind of catering to and satisfying the needs of the studio that we're working with.
Can you elaborate more on what Justin is looking for? In the past, you mentioned grandeur, underdog story, going up against a man, stories about family, or is that not really exciting to talk about?
Well, I mean, like what we're looking for can range from, just kind of a general genre, right? So you could be saying like, oh, I'm really passionate about Westerns. I really want to make a Western, or I really want to make a heist movie, or I really want to make a movie that's, set in the 1980s, or it can go really more into theme or character. And so like you were saying, John, and these themes that really resonate with him, a lot of times is very reflective of who he is as a person, his background. So, like underdog stories, going up against the system. And of course, if anyone's familiar with the Fast and Furious movies, family. The theme of family is very, very important, and that can be very, very reflective of somebody who, was an immigrant, was born in Taiwan, grew up in a blue collar family in Orange County. That kind of like outsider perspective, immigrant perspective, very much shapes who he is, and very much shapes the kinds of stories that he wants to tell.
How does one? It sounds so corny, but how does one become Justin? Because I watch movies, I watch all sorts of stuff. And it's like, oh yeah, this person's like a director or producer. Like, how did it work? And like, tack on question. I know that every career is different. Like, how have you approached your career? Are you trying to like mimic, famous actors? I'm sorry, famous like producers, directors, and like, what path did he take, and what path did you take?
I mean, so that's very reminiscent of my experience in film school. Going to school with a bunch of aspiring writers, directors, usually directors. These are all people who are trying to, follow that path and try to become, like the next Justin Lin. And that path is difficult. A lot of risk. Higher risk, maybe high reward, but man, it's a tough path where you really need to bet on yourself. The typical kind of way to go about that is you got to make something, and you got to make something that somehow kind of attracts a lot of attention, that gets producers, development executives, studios really excited. And but the challenge is getting your product in front of these people, in front of these eyeballs. And the most kind of traditional way of going about that is going the film festival route. So a lot of my NYU classmates, usually the process is in school, you're making a lot of short films to just kind of like hone your crafts, and just kind of like prove yourself a little bit. And then maybe your short films can get into a respected film festival, and hopefully that will help boost things. Because what your goal is, you typically is to get to a point where then you can shoot your own feature film. The biggest difference between a short film and a feature film is money. All right, so a short film, most people, you can just pick up a camera, find some friends, you go shoot it. Feature film, even you're probably looking at the cheapest. You're probably looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars, and hopefully you got to just find ways of raising that money. Right now, it's a lot of it is Kickstarter. A lot of it is calling your friends and family and trying to get enough people to toss in some cash. In Justin's situation, the mythology behind that is you just put used a bunch of credit cards, just spread the cost across like, I don't know, a dozen credit cards or whatever, and raise the money that way. Whatever you have to do to make sure that you can get the money in order to shoot your small budget independent film, and then you submit it to the film festivals, and you cross your fingers that it'll get accepted. For American filmmakers, the ideal spot is Sundance. That's the place to. If you get into Sundance, it's a huge boost to your career, because the entire industry, everybody goes to Sundance. Everybody pays attention to it. Whether or not your film actually gets picked up or not, that's a huge kind of like kind of boost to the next step of your career. There are other kind of major festivals that you can kind of follow that path as well. It's typically Toronto, and then the European festivals like Cannes, Berlin, Venice. Tribeca is another one that could be a good boost. So just for Justin, his big kind of breakthrough was Better Luck Tomorrow, kind of gathering a lot of his friends and spreading these costs on a bunch of credit cards, shooting it in Southern California. getting into Sundance. The odds of getting into Sundance is, extremely, extremely low. Apparently it's easier to get into Harvard than it is to get into Sundance. And then once you're at Sundance, hopefully agents, managers, producers, studio execs are going to Sundance. Hopefully they watch your film. Hopefully they love your film. The ideal situation is your film gets picked up for distribution. So like in Justin's case, Better Luck Tomorrow got picked up by MTV Films, got a distribution through Paramount, got a kind of like a cult following, and then also caught the attention of the studio execs around town, and that just kind of led him to his next project, like Annapolis, and then and Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. And then as long as you just kind of keep building from there, and that hopefully that your films keep getting better, keep growing its audience, and giving you the opportunity to kind of build your career and keep making the next thing.
From the way you teed up your answer, it seems like, that's what Justin did, and that's different from what you chose to do, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So my experience or my objective of going to film school is quite different from most people. I was on the producing track. There are a handful of students like me who are looking to follow the producer track. And but what was great about film school is I kind of still made myself learn and experience every other aspect of filmmaking. So writing, directing, cinematography, editing, sound, what have you. Just want to get, if I'm here, I'm going to get the full gamut of the experience. But what I learned is that my personality is, I love a little bit of risk in my life, but just seeing what my classmates and all my kind of predecessors, what they've had to go through, and even going to film school like NYU, and that the odds of making it is extremely, extremely low. That most people, this is graduate film school. So, these are, people in their, mid, late 20s, 30s, some 40s. And, this is NYU's giving you opportunity to pursue a filmmaking career. And the vast majority, you try it for a little bit, and then you actually have to move on to something else, just because it's just not it's just the opportunities aren't available for everybody. So it's a crazy high risk. And what I noticed is that so much of what it takes to actually break through and actually make a career out of everything is dealing with the gatekeepers. Gatekeepers meaning, usually, typically it's the reps, so the agents, the managers, and then to a lesser extent, the producers and studio execs, that they need to take a liking to you. They need to kind of believe in you, and then kind of take you from there. And I figured, rather than trying to appease or appeal to the gatekeepers, I'd rather be a gatekeeper, and decided to kind of pursue that. But I think another thing is just, something just a little bit steadier. I needed, I much preferred having a career where I knew where my next paycheck was coming from. I knew I had health insurance, all that kind of fun stuff. And then another answer to that is, like I said, I experienced every aspect of filmmaking, and just kind of determined that my brain wasn't wired like that. I just kind of working with all my other classmates these are people who are really, really kind of wired to become filmmakers, to be directors. And I knew how different I was in terms of the way we think, and in terms of the way we kind of perceive the world and perceive our work. And but what I realized I was most passionate about, and what I felt like most aligned with my strengths, was not to go and tell my own stories, but to work with really, really talented storytellers and help them kind of achieve their vision, right? Guiding, kind of working in tandem with them, and just kind of help guide them, because it is a really treacherous process to go from, you're a filmmaker, you have this idea, and how do you go from that to, actually getting made? And I loved working with filmmakers. I loved just kind of talking through ideas and how do we make things happen? How do we make things better? And yeah, aligned with what I loved and what I'm better at, much better than actually going and being a filmmaker myself.
Well, and I would say, a career as a creative development executive is also nice work if you can get it. I feel like it's hard enough to get these opportunities as well. And do you have any advice for someone who's trying to break in?
Being a producer, being a development exec was actually not my kind of original objective. I didn't know this was a real job. I didn't know, and I didn't even know like the creative side of the entertainment industry felt like such a black box, such a kind of opaque thing from somebody from the outside who knew he loved movies, who knew he loved media, that I didn't even know this was a career you can pursue, or that I was even equipped to do so. My original objective was actually, so I knew I loved movies, I knew I loved TV, I knew I loved the entertainment industry, and wanted to be involved in some way. And I was just like, I opened myself to any kind of opportunity, right? I never I'm only speaking for myself. I never like pinpointed like I need to be that exact role. I need to do that job exactly, or I needed to work there. For me, I just wanted to be involved in some way, some kind of fulfilling way. And so my original kind of plan was to go to business school, to get an MBA at a business school that had some kind of connection to the entertainment industry, and then using that as a way in to the industry, and then kind of work more on the corporate side of things. So working at a studio, maybe working in like marketing or finance or strategy, what have you. And it was actually just a stroke of luck that I learned about this dual degree program that at NYU, where you're doing your kind of full MBA as well as a full MFA in the film school. And I just kind of like, when I learned about that program, I just kind of thought, oh, that seems really cool. I love the creative side of the industry. I love the business side of things. And that felt like everything I wanted, everything I was looking for. But it was more of a dream than anything like that. And so I just kind of threw my hat in the ring, just seeing what would happen. And so it was only just kind of pure luck that I was accepted into a program that it gave me the opportunity, but also gave me the maybe the awareness that something like this kind of path was even possible.